Welcome to the greatest podcast in sports betting entertainment. My name is Tanner Kern, certified G, bona fide stud, and you can't teach that. In this right here, this is G Money Grant Mitchell. We are here breaking down everything you need to know in the world of college football in the NFL, and you can't teach that. Bada boom, man, the people in the room. G Money Grant Mitchell, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited, Tanner. My Commanders are playing the Panthers this week. That should be an easy win for us. Should get us to 5-2. And our game against the Bears has already been flexed. It's pretty cool that we've got, both Washington and Chicago, two teams that are not used to winning a lot of games, are getting this notoriety. I'm excited.
Baker Mayfield's the top 5 quarterback.
Top 5?
Top 5.
No.
Top 5.
No.
He's playing like a top 5.
He's playing right around there. I don't know. He got a lot of steam for last week. He threw 3 picks. Like, we can't forget about that.
One was like tipped. One was a ridiculous tip. One was overthrown. I don't know what the other one was, but they still won by 30 points. That's impressive. Not 30, with 20 something. That's impressive.
24. It's 51-27.
When you throw 3 interceptions and can still win by that much, still pretty impressive. And they gave them the ball, the Saints the ball inside the 50-yard line. I think every time. I could be wrong about that, but a lot of the picks were inside the 50-yard line.
I mean, the Saints are awful. One of my bets that I placed during the preseason, I had a win total. No, sorry, I had a playoff parlay. It was 3 teams to miss the playoffs. I had the Raiders to miss the playoffs, the Giants to miss the playoffs, and the Saints to miss the playoffs. And it was a plus 150, which I know isn't super high for a parlay, but I didn't think any 3 of those teams are going to make it. And so far, it's looking pretty good.
It should be interesting to see what the Giants do. Apparently people are saying they're going to make some big moves at the deadline, try to be a contender. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I do know that the Buccaneers are a contender and they look really damn good right now. Really good.
Have you seen some Giants fans want them to trade for Matt Stafford?
I saw that one on Twitter. I don't know. Was that real? I don't know who reported it yesterday, but why would you want to trade for Matt Stafford? Does he make them that much better? No,
that's the thing. When Stafford was traded to the Rams, they had the Super Bowl team ready for him. The Giants don't have that, and Stafford is 36, 37 years old with a long history of injuries, some of them really serious. He had the really bad back problems.
Yeah, and honestly, the Rams have no weapons right now because everyone's injured, but Stafford still, the Giants don't have that many weapons when you really think about it, unless Malik Neighbors is super healthy. He's the only real field stretcher on that team. So I don't know how much Matt Stafford's going to make a difference there.
Yeah, and Brian Dable looks more and more stressed every game. They've lost Kayvon Thibodeau. I think he's on IR now. Andrew Thomas as well. Andrew Thomas is gone for the year. I don't get it.
No, I don't either. But today, Grant, we're talking a lot of college football. So we got to talk some college football. But before we do that, make sure you go check out WSN.com. Links in the description below. Sign up. Check it out. Get all the information, email alerts, betting previews, prop bets, picks, analysis, everything that will make you a better sports bettor.
Well said. Well said, Tanner. It's important to be a good sports bettor this weekend because there's some really exciting stuff to bet on. College football, as you mentioned, we got Bama, Tennessee, and we got Georgia, Texas. Those are going to be the 2 biggest games of the weekend. It's funny that everything just continues to run through the SEC, but these are the best games. I'm interested. Obviously, I'm interested in Georgia, Texas, but I really want to see what happens with this Bama, Tennessee game as well. You remember 2 years ago, Tennessee upset Bama at home. That's when Hendon Hooker was there. They ripped the goalpost off, threw him in the river. Neither one of these quarterbacks has been very good recently, that being Jalen Milroe and Nico Iamaleava. They've been having down games recently. It should be a defensive game. But then you think about the fact that Bama has had defensive problems, especially with their cornerbacks, and Tennessee, while they also have been really good, they have not played a good quarterback. So I think it is, quote unquote, a defensive game, but it's really just more which quarterback makes the plays when given the opportunity.
I don't know if Milroe's been bad because he has made plays in games to help them win the game. But
he's not been at his best.
Yeah, he's not been at his best. But I don't think Jalen Milroe of the first few weeks of the season where he was super efficient through the air is what you get from Jalen Milroe. That's not the kind of quarterback he is. We saw it last year. He's still not comfortable in the pocket. Unless he's taking shots down the field, he's not a quarterback that's going to dissect you there. He needs to run the ball. And when he does that, he has made a lot of plays. But I agree with you. I think this is going to be a game that I would trust Alabama here, but it's hard to trust Alabama, especially with their secondary and especially on the road with the fact that Tennessee can throw the ball. I think the over is probably the move here if I am picking a bet in this one. But whoever loses this game is eliminated from the college football playoff in my mind. They could sneak in depending on what happens, but you are sweating it out every single game moving forward if you don't win this one.
Yeah, it's like when you're trying to get into March Madness and you're on the bubble and you gotta, sit, you gotta watch the selection show, see if you get in. I'm with you on that part. What I'm not so sure about is Nico Iamaleava. If we go back to before the season started, I had a hot take that by the end of the year, he was going to be the best quarterback in college football. The first 3 games of the season, he was on pace to do that. The last 3 games, he's averaging 170 yards per game, 60% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Again, this Bama defense, it's funny because what we know about Nick Saban is they had a great defense every year. This defense is not the best, and their corners specifically, they're so young that they have not held up well when they've been targeted really heavily. So I want to know, is Nico's severe decline in conference play, is that an indication that he's still a freshman? So maybe he's not ready for this level of competition, or does he have it in him to bring it back up? And again, the Bama defense, not the toughest in the world. It's not a Texas. It's not a Georgia. It's not an Ohio State. So I'm really interested to see how he plays. And then, like you said, I would agree with you. Milroe has not been bad. He has been making winning plays, but he hasn't been dominating like he was in the first half of that Georgia game. Look at the South Carolina game. He did have to make his plays, yes, but he also allowed South Carolina to hang around and to remain in contention for that game. So it's just going to be whichever quarterback comes out and steps up and has their day, that's probably going to be the team that wins the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This is not a slam dunk Alabama play, though. There's a lot of people out there that think Alabama's a much better team than Tennessee. They're not. Alabama's not good. Like I think the past 2 weeks, we saw Alabama go to the national championship last year on the backs of their defense, on the back of Jalen Milroe playing better and better. But that's not the Alabama of this year. This is a totally different team. They are not worthy of being the number 1 team in the nation. The win over Georgia, not saying it was a fluke, but they came out extremely hot and put Georgia in a spot where it was very tough to come back. And Georgia did ultimately come back in that game. I think coming out of that one, the Bulldogs actually showed more. Like if you're the college football playoff committee now, and both teams have 1 loss, say both teams would finish with 1 loss, you're putting Georgia in the rankings. And I know it would come down to SEC championship and all that stuff, but you're putting Georgia ahead of Alabama because of how they came back in that football game.
I'm with you that they showed something, and that's something that Kirby Smart and them can draw on, the fact that we did come back. But it also showcased Alabama's ceiling, right? And especially not just the players, but showcased Kalen DeBoer and his ability to game plan. Because when it was, everything was planned, everything was scripted, it was 2 teams going at it with what should be their best stuff from the get-go. And Bama dominated them. They manhandled them. It was 28-0 within the first 15 minutes. So that's the ceiling they have. They're not going to hit that every game, but we have seen it. The question now becomes, can they replicate that? Can they duplicate that? And that's also why the last 2 weeks have been so disappointing. The loss to Vanderbilt does speak for itself, but against South Carolina, they were behind in the 4th quarter, I believe. So What's it going to be? And this, to your point, this Tennessee defense is awesome. They hold opponents to the 2nd fewest yards per play. They're below 4 yards per play and the 5th fewest points per game. So it's going to be tough for Bama to go on the road and make an impact against this defense.
And I think going back to that Georgia game, though, as far as confidence for Alabama, Carson Beck just didn't play his game in the first half. In the second half, he came out and looked 10 times better. He turned the ball over more than Alabama forced the interceptions. I think offensively, Alabama hit some deep shots down the field to Ryan Williams, which they're going to do. But in this game, if you're Alabama, you're coming off a loss to Vanderbilt. You're coming off a tight game last week against South Carolina. Now you got to go on the road to Tennessee, which is a very hostile environment against a really good defense. This is not going to be easy. I think there's a lot of people who like the Tide. I don't know who I like at this game. I think Tennessee could easily win it. I think Alabama could easily win it. So it would probably be a stay away for me. But don't be surprised if Alabama loses this one. And because they're lost to Vanderbilt, they're probably done in the college football playoff.
I'm with you. Don't be surprised, but I am picking Alabama -2.5 in this game. That's my pick for this. Tennessee holds teams to less than 3 yards per carry, but they're only about 36th, I believe, in yards per pass attempt on defense. So if Milroe is going to be able to connect on those deep shots with Ryan Williams, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Comes down to Nico making these throws. We saw him against Florida. We saw him against Arkansas. Saw him against Oklahoma. He wasn't able to do it.
Yep. All right, Grant, the big one. Georgia, Texas. Georgia wins outright.
Wow. What makes you say that?
I think they're a better team.
But why? What? Give me something.
I think Carson Beck can outplay Quinn Ewers. I don't think Quinn Ewers is the answer here. I think defensively, Texas is very good. I think Georgia can match everything they do on defense. And I think going into the year, we were talking about Georgia being the top team in the nation. And when it comes down to it, I do trust Carson Beck more than I trust Quinn Ewers. And all this together, too, if Georgia doesn't lose to Alabama, which they nearly didn't lose to Alabama, Georgia would probably be plus 2.5 in this game, I would say. And Texas also, look at their schedule. Who have they played? Nobody. Have not played a soul. Michigan on the road, maybe, doesn't really mean anything. Michigan can't do much. Oklahoma last week shouldn't even be a top 25 team. Georgia's more battle-tested. They've played a tougher SEC schedule so far. This is a spot where the experience is going to help them win outright in this game.
So it's an interesting take. The line is actually moving in Texas's favor. Believe it opened at 2.5, and it's now Texas minus 4.5. I'm on the opposite side. I'm on Texas's side. Now, I agree with you that Carson Beck can outplay Quinn Ewers. If you look at the adjustments that ever since the start of the second half of the Bama game, I think that Kirby Smart and the offensive staff went to Carson Beck and said, look, our offense isn't scoring. You got to take some risks. And that's going to lead to you turning the ball over, but it's also going to open up our offense a lot more. If you look at Carson Beck in his last 3 games, he had 439 yards against Bama. We know most of those came in the second half. Then he goes for 240, 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago, and he has 459, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks against Mississippi State. That game was closer than you would have liked, and you don't like the 2 picks, but the 459 yards was a career high. He's completed at least 75% of his passes in 2 straight weeks. And then, like I said, he also had 440 yards, 3 touchdowns against Bama. So he's putting air under the ball, and it is creating that explosive factor Georgia lacked at the beginning of the season. What I'm so worried about for Georgia here is, first of all, I think sometimes going on the road can be a little overblown. I think sometimes we just say this team's going to have a home field advantage. We don't think much of it. This is Texas's first home game against a top power as a member of the SEC. So I think that crowd's going to be really raucous and wild for them. I also think that Texas has the best offensive line in the country, and Georgia's defensive front has been underperforming. If you look at how they were able to win every game except for one for 3 years in a row, they did it a lot of the time by just overwhelming their opponents at the point of attack. I don't think they're going to be able to do that in this game. Again, Carson Beck can outperform Quinn Ewers, but is Georgia's defense capable of playing at the same level that Texas's is? Well, Texas gives up the fewest yards per play and the fewest points per game. So I don't know. I think there's just a lot of reasons that you go for Texas. I think there's a wider array of possibilities that end in them winning, whereas I think it has to be a very certain style of game for Georgia to win.
Yeah, I would take 5 points, though. 4.5, 5, for sure.
I mean, if it keeps moving and it gets to 5.5, 6, at that point, like, you do have to take Georgia.
So if you look at DraftKings right now, at least for the betting splits, because that's what I can pull up, Georgia's getting 43% of the bets, 56% of the money, and lines moving away from that. So it's pretty interesting if that is the case. But when I look at Carson Beck, and I know college football is about star players, I think Carson Beck can redeem himself from the Alabama performance and go outperform Quinn Ewers. And I am worried that Texas hasn't played anybody yet. It's easy to be a god against teams that you're supposed to be a god against. But when you look at Georgia's schedule, going on the road to Alabama in that game will be just as tough as going on the road to Texas in this game. So we'll see what happens.
And to your point about looking like gods against teams you should look like gods against, look what happened with Ohio State. Now, they still looked good against Oregon, right? Not saying they didn't, but they were the ones who were allowing the fewest points per game, the fewest yards per play. They face Oregon, and Oregon puts 32 points on them, like 450 yards of total offense. It can happen. So there is absolutely a world where Georgia goes here and they do make those plays. my concern again would be Georgia does not have good wide receivers and they don't have a great running game. Trevor Etienne has had some of his moments, but he hasn't really been able to consistently improve himself. And Texas does have a great defensive line. They do have a lot of speed in the linebacking unit. So again, I think it is possible, but I think we're on opposite sides of this one.
Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about the college football playoff now, though. When you look at the college football playoff, who's going to get in right now if we had to pick? Oregon?
Okay, are we saying at this exact moment who's in, or are we guessing?
Like pending what happens this weekend. We could talk about some bubble teams, I guess. Like LSU right now plus 135. If they beat Texas A&M and they beat Bama, which Bama going on the road to LSU is a very bad matchup for Alabama because LSU can throw the ball over the field. I would say LSU has a better chance at plus 135 than Bama minus 350 right now is very scary. That's probably not going to hit.
Yeah, they're one loss away from having about a 50-50 chance of missing it.
All right, so Oregon gets in. Let's just go off the odds. Texas,
Oregon and Ohio State are in.
Ohio State. I'm just hammering the favorites right now. Does Penn State get in? Yeah, because they're going to lose to Ohio State and beat Michigan.
Yep. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, they all get in.
Georgia gets in. Even with a loss this weekend, Georgia gets in.
They do get in. Who else? They have Tennessee. Do they have any other big teams coming up?
No, I think this is it.
Let me see here. I got their schedule.
They may have Ole Miss. Do they have Ole Miss?
They do. They're at Ole Miss and they're home for Tennessee. I still think they would win both of those. So yeah, I'll put them in.
Alabama. I don't think Alabama's going to get in. I think Alabama's going to slip up either this weekend or against LSU.
Bama's in right now. That's the tricky part. Do you think they're going to slip up or not? Obviously, I picked them to win, but we both recognize there's a real possibility they lose to Tennessee. So it's scary. The Vanderbilt loss does not help them. They lose one time, they might be out.
All right. So should I put them? I'll put them in right now, I guess.
Well, the problem is I'm with you on LSU, and especially the fact that Bama has to go to LSU. That's tough. It's going to be a night game. And Texas A&M, they're not. I don't know. I don't think Texas A&M is better than Bama, but they're probably only going to have one loss to Texas, and at that point, they're in the college football playoff. Either
LSU or Texas A&M, and realistically, if Texas A&M were to beat LSU, they're going to the college football. They're not going to the college football playoff. Yes, they are, but they're going to the SEC championship game if they were just to lose to. If they beat LSU, because they're going to win out in the SEC.
Yeah, and their final game of the year is against Texas. They could lose that and lose the SEC championship game and still go to the playoff.
Yeah, because they're going to be a one-loss regular season SEC team with their only loss to the number one team or top 5 team in the nation. So I'm going to put Texas A&M in right now. I'm going to keep Alabama because either Texas A&M or LSU is going to get in. Not both of them will get in. So I'm going to put one of them in. I'm going to put Alabama in right now. So
it's Texas A&M or LSU, but if Texas A&M wins that game, I think they're pretty much a lock. If LSU wins, they're not a lock. They are just alive.
Yeah, so I'll put Alabama and Texas A&M and the asterisks on Alabama right now. Miami's getting in as a champ of the ACC.
Clemson's getting in.
Clemson's getting in as the backup champ of the ACC. Notre Dame probably is going to get in.
They're tricky. I've heard a lot of discourse about this. People have said even if they win out, they might not get in.
A 2-loss Alabama to Tennessee and Vanderbilt, or a 1-loss Notre Dame. I would take Alabama. I don't know how the committee would react to that, though.
I would take Alabama as well.
All right,
Notre Dame is not an overwhelmingly impressive team, and that loss to Northern Illinois excuse me, had to sneeze. The loss to Northern Illinois it's not the same as Bama losing to Georgia.
Or Bama losing Vanderbilt. UConn, Buffalo barely beat NIU or something, then UConn smacked Buffalo around. So yeah, that's a bad loss.
Sorry, I meant Georgia losing to Bama, not Bama losing to Georgia. But
Boise State gets in.
At this point, they do. Now, they have a sneaky tough. If you've been watching college football and you know some of the teams that aren't historical powers, but are good this season. Like they do play UNLV. That's not an easy game. And they close the season with Oregon State, who might not be ranked right now, but that's not going to be easy. And then they've got a conference championship game. They've already lost once to Oregon. It is Oregon, but because they're a G5 team, they probably have to win out. So, I mean, I still think they will get in, but it's not like they're a lock necessarily.
Well, they'll get in if they win their conference, because like with the highest group of 5 conference or whatever gets in. So they're probably going to be that team, unless you give it to like Army or Navy. But,
well, that's the thing. What happens with the academies?
Yeah. Again, I think that spot doesn't matter. One of those spots is going to Boise State, Army, Navy, one of those teams. So we'll reserve one for a group of 5. That's the Boise State one right now.
You know what will really help Boise too is if Jeanty does go on to have this Heisman campaign, if he breaks Barry Sanders' record. I know technically that shouldn't play into it, but are we going to leave the Heisman winner out of the playoff if his team has one loss? No.
No, the committee wants him in. Okay, so then like looking at the rankings, BYU is currently 6-0.
Yeah, BYU is in right now.
They're plus 350 to get in because of what do they have a tough schedule coming up probably?
Let's see here. BYU is in and Iowa State is in as of right now. BYU is Oklahoma State, UCF, Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston. So not easy, but not brutal.
No, I mean they're 13th right now in the country. Like I would put them in over Notre Dame right now.
I would too. Same with Iowa State.
Indiana's undefeated. They won't finish undefeated.
They're very tough. They've got Ohio State later in the year. If somehow they upset it, then that changes everything. Ohio State would still be in, but now you've got to get Indiana in there.
I don't know if Ohio State gets in.
If they lose to Oregon and Indiana?
I mean, it depends what happens in the SEC.
It does.
It does. I mean, that because if you got Alabama, if Alabama were to win out and Tennessee lose to Alabama, but Tennessee's a 2-loss SEC school, I don't know.
So Indiana has Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State. They should win all of those. Nebraska's tough, but they should win all of those. They've got Michigan. At that point, you would take them over Michigan. And then they have Ohio State, Purdue. So Indiana could lose only to Ohio State, and now they're 11-1.
And do they get in over Notre Dame? Probably. So right now we have Oregon, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Alabama, Miami, Clemson, Boise State, Texas A&M, BYU. That's 4, 8. So we have one more team. So that would either go to an Indiana or that would go to LSU, Notre Dame, Ole Miss. It's going to go to a 2-loss SEC school, a 1-loss Big Ten school, or Notre Dame.
Or Army Navy.
Well, you're not going to put Boise. You're not going to get Army Navy.
No, you're not.
One of those spots is for them. So that's the college football playoff.
I'm looking forward to it. Again, I know it's gotten a lot of criticism. I think this is fun. I think the 12-team playoff is fun.
Why has it got a lot of criticism? I don't get it. It's more fun than a four-team playoff.
Well, it's criticism because of people like you. When Cincinnati made the playoff and I said they deserve to be there, and you said, no, they don't. You said there's no point. We know what's going to happen anyway. This is just a
no, they don't
action, but for college teams.
Yeah, well, you can't when it's like people need to understand that the SEC is better than everyone else. They need to. Like Florida State last year, the committee made the right move. They kept them out because they weren't they weren't a top 4 team in the country. If you're going off like entertainment value.
Well, that's why this is getting criticism because people are saying it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter in the first, if a 12 beats a 5, they're going to lose to the 1 seed.
Yeah, pretty much.
I like it. I think it's fun.
I think it's awesome. I think it's great. It adds a little more excitement. I think they need to go to 16. But the problem is too, the SEC, tell me that right now, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, or Miami or Clemson is better than any SEC school. Like you could pick 3 SEC
I definitely think Oregon and Ohio State are better than pretty much every SEC school.
No.
Yes,
no.
I would say
Georgia smacks them. Both those teams smack them.
I think Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas are the 3 best teams in the country.
No. The SEC is far above anything the Big Ten or the not Pac-12.
So you think Alabama's better than Ohio State? Or
I
Oregon?
think Alabama matches up tougher against Oregon and Ohio State. Yes, I do. I have the SEC is the kings of football. And again, too, like you look at the Big Ten, nobody's tested. I
mean, Penn State, Indiana, Illinois, like they're good teams. We're not looking at them to win the college football playoff.
What tell me, when was the last time Ohio State won the national championship?
2014. Are we living in 2014 right now?
That's my point, though. That's my point. It's been a decade.
What does that have to do with now? Nick Saban is gone. Georgia is having a down year. The powers are changing. With the transfer portal and NIL, 2024 is nothing like it was 10 years ago.
The SEC is king, Grant. That's what it comes down to.
It's king because of its depth and its consistent quality. There's still one school from this conference, one school from this conference that can stand up to them.
All right. Since 2010, there has been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 SEC champions like that won the national title. That just shows
2010. Since 2010 means nothing. It's the transfer portal, NIL era. Everything has changed.
No, it did. But still, the SEC is king. If you're not tested,
yes, but the Ole Miss is not better than Ohio State.
Ole Miss is not better than Ohio State. I'm not saying Ole Miss is better than Ohio State. I'm saying the quality of competition in the SEC is so much better week in and week out that when these teams get to the big game, they perform better against these trash Big Ten schools.
I 1000% agree with that. Now, do you want to talk about the national champions last year who had a cupcake schedule in the Big Ten? And then they went to the playoff and they dominated the SEC?
I wouldn't say they dominated the SEC. Alabama was one drive away from winning that game. So they
played like trash the whole game.
And Alabama didn't play well either.
That's what I'm saying. Alabama did not play well. And it was because the defense was so good.
And they still almost beat Michigan.
And they didn't.
But I'm not saying that. You look at the SEC over the SEC. You can't sit here and say the Ohio State is better than Texas right now or even Georgia right now because they don't play anybody week in and week out. They just went on the road and lost to Oregon in a game where their quarterback slid with 3 seconds left.
Okay, I said I am not arguing the SEC is the king of college football. I am arguing the fact that you said there are many SEC teams that are better than these other schools. There is at maximum Texas and Georgia are better than Ohio State and Oregon.
I think we'd have to see
two SEC schools.
I think we'd have to see it play out, though. I can't sit here and say that. I can't sit here and say Alabama doesn't play with those teams. We have to see it play out for sure. We can
say that about anything. I don't know what you want. I don't agree. I think Ohio State's really good, and I think Oregon's really good.
I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying the SEC is king, and there's a reason why the SEC is going to get in so many champions because it's a tougher conference.
But you know why this is also a silly conversation? When we're talking about the SEC is king, Texas right now is the best team in the SEC. This is their first year in the SEC. So you're going back to 2010 and giving me all the champions. Texas literally has not competed in the postseason as a member of the SEC, but now they get credit for being in the SEC?
Yeah, because they're in the SEC. Why'd they want to come to the SEC? Because it's the king of college football, and
because there's money there.
Yeah, because it's the best conference in America, because there's been 9 national champions since 2010, and the Big Ten has fallen apart in these games. Last year, obviously, they won. But overall, week in, week out, SEC is king. I mean, you look at, I can look at Ohio State's schedule right now and say they're getting in the college football playoff. I can't look at Alabama's schedule and say they're getting in because of how many tests they have down the stretch. Same thing with Tennessee. Same thing with Ole Miss. Same thing with LSU, right? Week in and week out, there's a lot more toughness in the SEC. And if you get in as an SEC team, you have to earn it a lot more than you do as a Big Ten team. Look at Penn State. Penn State's got 2 tough games, and I don't classify USC on the road as a tough game. They found a way to win it. But if they just split between Michigan and Ohio State, they're getting in. And I think Penn State would get smacked around by these SEC schools, by Alabama included.
Well, when you get into the bottom parts of the conference, yes, the middle of the SEC is significantly better than the middle of any other conference. The top, again, I disagree with you, but I agree the SEC has a tougher schedule. I don't know that makes them a better team. In fact, I think the way these teams beat up on each other hurts them when they get to the playoff. Michigan did not play a tough schedule at all, but that allowed them to work out some of the kinks and to save themselves. You don't have to be at your best early in the season like you do if you are a Bama or Georgia because you have that game. So you get to the playoff and they are able to get their way to the national championship game. What happened on the other side? We had Texas and Washington. Washington had an easier schedule. They were not as heralded as Texas was, but because great coaching, obviously, but also they had an easy schedule, they didn't have to beat themselves up as much. They got to the championship game. So beating the SEC might make you more battle tested, but that's not always a good thing when you get into the deeper parts of the season.
Grant, there's been 9 SEC champions since 2010.
Stop telling me about the past. This is the most talented college football has ever been. And because of NIL, there is more parity than there's ever been.
We don't know that until we actually see it roll out, Grant. When did NIL come
Washington
in? When did NIL hit?
Michigan and Bama.
When was NIL ruled in?
Like 3 years ago, 3, 4.
2020, let's say. I think it was
around there. Yeah.
LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan. Bang. End of conversation.
No, Tanner, that's a bad comparison, because when you make a change, the whole world does not just change at a moment's notice. It takes time. You've got to convince kids to leave their programs. You've got to convince high schoolers to come to your school. And then once they get there, you have to develop them.
Every year, a Big Ten or an ACC team gets in the college football playoff, and typically the SEC team wins. If you bet on the SEC team the past 10 years, you've made money.
Stop telling me. We need to move on. Stop telling me about a decade ago. It's a different era. It's a different landscape.
SEC is king. Let's finish with college football. Let's just do college football today. So we got our Ashton Jeanty situation here. Why don't you break that one down with Travis Hunter?
Oh yes, the Ashton Jeanty. So Travis Hunter was on Robert Griffin III's podcast. That podcast is called Out of Pocket with RG3, and he was talking about his Heisman showdown with Ashton Jeanty. And this is a direct quote from what Travis Hunter said. "I know I can win it, but I know who's there. I don't know who's there. I mean, y'all see Ashton Jeanty, but it's not like we haven't seen a running back that's good. We haven't seen a player that plays both ways. I'm going to keep saying that. Jeanty has, I think, 95 carries for 1,000 yards. If I had 95 catches, how many yards do you think I'd have? If I had 95 targets on defense, what do you think I'd have? So I tried to tell you, he's got double the touches I've got on the offensive side of the ball, and I still have the defensive stats. That's still crazy, and we're only in week 6, so I'm not going to argue about it."
I'm gonna make a comparison here, and this is not the right comparison. It's not 100% accurate. But if I'm playing college football 25 on rookie mode, or I'm playing college football 25 on Heisman mode, my stats aren't going to be as good on Heisman mode. And Ashton Jeanty's unbelievable, but he's doing this against kids that are not making a ton of NIL money. If you're a not decent college football player, if you're a really good college football player, you're going to a big time school right now. And he's putting up bigger numbers than he should, even against the competition that he is doing it against. However, he is not doing this in the SEC or the Big Ten or the ACC or the Big 12. He's doing it in the Mountain West Conference. So I think right there, the fact that Travis Hunter plays both ways and does it at an extremely high level, and the amount of plays that he's been able to make doing that over the past 2 seasons, I would lean towards Travis Hunter more than Ashton.
So I think Travis Hunter is the best player in college football.
Did you like my comparison, though?
To the playing the video game? Yeah, no, it's a good one. It is a good one. I think Travis Hunter is the best player in college football. I think Ashton Jeanty is the Heisman winner. I hear what you're saying. For me, the big thing is he might not play Texas, Ohio State every week, but he played Oregon in the second week of the season, and he went for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns and was by far the best player on the field. Oregon only won that game because they got 2 special teams touchdowns. A running back almost inspired a road upset of a top team in the country, a team that's currently ranked number 2, second in national championship odds. You look at what Ohio State just did against Oregon, and Ohio State is one of the best rushing attacks in college football. They were held well below their season average. They were held under 5 yards per carry. Against, again, Jeanty on his own was at 7.7 with 3 touchdowns. So not facing the best competition every week, but we saw what happened when he did face the best competition. Now, what Travis Hunter said about if I had 95 touches, how many yards do you think I had? Not many more than Ashton Jeanty. Travis Hunter is averaging 12 yards per reception, which is not a whole lot, not for a receiver. Jeanty's averaging 10 yards per carry. For a running back and a receiver to be giving you basically the same amount of yards per touch is asinine. And Jeanty is currently on pace to break Barry Sanders' single season rushing record. If he runs for 2,700 yards in one season like he's on pace to, I don't know how you don't give him the Heisman.
I agree with that. I think if we're just going off putting up pure numbers, I would say that is the move. I don't think Oregon was playing the same football as they were then as they are now, but it's still impressive performance. Best player in college football is definitely Travis Hunter. The stat patter is Ashton Jeanty. So
I can't let you do that. He has been pulled at halftime of 2 games.
I'm not saying stat patter. I'm saying the guy who puts up the stats.
You said stat patter. You literally said stat patter.
Not stat. Well, obviously, he's stat padding. He's getting a lot of carries, Grant. He's putting up stats.
Stat padding. They've said it. He has not played in the second half in a third of their games.
I use stat patter differently there. I didn't mean that. The guy who's putting up the big stats. How about that?
Okay.
Is that better for you?
Yes.
Okay. The guy who's putting up.
I'm in favor. I don't know what your take on this is. When someone is on the verge of individual history, like I get mad anytime Steph, or not Klay Thompson anymore, but at a point when they would have like 13 3-pointers in 3 quarters and then Steve Kerr wouldn't play him in the 4th quarter. Like they're right there on the verge of making history. Let them go do it. So with Jeanty, like I want to see him break Barry Sanders' record. And so I want him to go stat pad, but they aren't letting him.
What games did he miss the second half in?
Let me see. I think it was the 4th game of the season. I forget who it was against. Here, let me go pulling up his game log.
Maybe? 13 for 186 against Utah State.
It was it was Utah State and it was, what is this? Portland State.
But yeah, it's like he shouldn't play in the second half of those games. I'm sorry. They're winning by a lot. Boise State's trying to make the college football playoff. You're not going to play him in the second half. He had plenty. He did his job that day. But it's hard to go against Travis Hunter. Yeah, and it might not even be Travis Hunter. It could be Dylan Gabriel, honestly, like how he's looked. Like he's the second in the odds right now. Travis Hunter is 2 behind him. So I think when you're looking at importance to their team, though, they both have equal importance to their team. Neither team would be good without these 2 players. That's another conversation too, which makes it hard.
It's also harder to have the conversation because neither one of them are quarterbacks. We're so used to it having to be a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Hard conversation. You need to see what happens in the second half of the season. Honestly, I think if you had a decent offensive line in Colorado and you had Travis Hunter just playing receiver, he would be putting up insane numbers. But that's not the
thing about Travis. That's why I'm so excited to see him in the pros, because right now he doesn't look like a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase type player, but he's playing every play on both sides. If they let him rest, imagine how much quicker he's going to be, how much higher he's going to jump. I know he has great stamina, but still, you're going to be able to do more if you're playing half as many snaps, whether it's on the offensive or defensive side of the football. I want to see what it looks like when he is at 100% on every play.
Yeah. So who wins the Heisman? Ashton Jeanty?
I think Jeanty's the best bet, and that's what the odds would say. But to your point, Dylan Gabriel is climbing. He would fallen way out, but the Ohio State win really pushed him back up there. In that vein, Carson Beck. If Carson Beck goes for another 400 yards, which would make it 3 times in the last 4 weeks, Texas gets upset by Georgia at home, Carson Beck is going to shoot up in odds. You can say the same with Milroe going on the road to beat Tennessee. Not as big of a win, but if Milroe has a great game and maybe Nico has a great game too and Milroe runs a shootout, there are some players on this list that look like they're really far behind in odds, but they're just 1 week away from turning it around.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Grant, why don't you take us out of here after a big day of college football. We haven't done college football on the show in a while.
No, we haven't. It was really good. So, guys, if you are a college football fan, you're just a football fan or a sports fan, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well, drop some comments, let Tanner and I know who you think is going to win the Heisman and who wins the big games this weekend. Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas. Let us know. We'll be responding to all the comments. Thank you all for tuning in. We will catch you in the next episode of Ride the Line.